felt completely lost, even when surrounded by people? Have you ever wished, from the bottom of your soul, for a light to take you out of the darkness? Have you ever sat in silence, in the middle of the night, begging for an answer that never seemed to come? Have you ever felt, even if only for a moment, that something invisible enveloped you and lifted you up when you thought you couldn't get up on your own? I felt all of this, and more, much more. Today, I'm going to share with you the most important story of my life. It's not an easy story. It's not a story I'd tell just any time. But it's the true story of when I hit rock bottom and found, right there, the light I'd been searching for. This is the story of when the divine light found me, or perhaps when I finally allowed it to find me. Take a deep breath with me now. Prepare your heart, because this journey, this story, might be a bit of your story too. And if it is, know that you are not alone. You never have been. This is the story of when I hit rock bottom and found the light. There was a moment when I just broke down. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single, catastrophic event. It was a slow, silent erosion, like water dripping incessantly over a rock until, one day, the rock splits in half. I woke up every morning with a weight on my chest that felt physical. My arms were there, my legs moved, I went to work, I smiled when I needed to, I responded to people asking me, "How are you?" with the automatic, "I'm fine, how are you?" But inside, I was empty, completely empty. It was as if someone had stripped me of my essence, leaving only the shell, the covering, functioning on automatic. I existed, but I didn't live. I breathed, but I couldn't feel the air. I walked, but I didn't know where. At night, when the house finally fell silent and I was alone with myself, the emptiness turned into something even worse. A black hole that sucked away any shred of hope I tried to keep alive. I stared at the ceiling, in the darkness of the room, and asked myself, is this all? Is this what life is like? Wake up, work, come back, sleep, repeat, until I die? The worst kind of loneliness, I've discovered, isn't being physically alone. It's being surrounded by people and feeling completely disconnected from them all. I was at family parties, work meetings, gatherings with friends, but it was as if there was an invisible glass between me and the rest of the world. I saw everything happening on the other side, heard the laughter, saw the connections, but I couldn't get through. I couldn't feel. My family would ask me what was wrong. "You walk differently," they'd say. "You don't seem like yourself." And they were right. I wasn't myself anymore. But how to explain this? How to put into words a void that has no shape, a pain that has no name? So I lied. "I'm just tired. It's work. It'll pass." But it didn't pass. It never passed. There were days when taking a shower felt like a monumental task. Days when choosing what to wear consumed all my energy. Days when I'd sit on the edge of my bed and stay there, motionless, for hours, thinking of nothing, feeling nothing, just existing in the void. My body was exhausted from an exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. I'd sleep 10, 12 hours and wake up more tired than when I went to bed. It was as if my soul was drained, and no amount of physical rest could restore it. The food had no taste. The music didn't touch my heart. The movies I loved no longer moved me. Everything was gray. Everything was flat. Everything was nothing. I was numb to life. It was like walking in an endless tunnel, in the middle of the night, without a flashlight, not knowing if there is a way out, or if the tunnel goes on forever until you simply give up walking and lie there, on the cold, dark ground, and accept that this is all there is. There were times when I thought about giving up. I won't lie about that. There were nights when the idea of simply not waking up the next day seemed like the only possible relief from that nameless pain, that weight with no identifiable origin. They weren't clear, organized thoughts. It was more of a surrender, a weariness so profound with one's own existence that continuing seemed harder than stopping. And it was exactly at that point, at the lowest point, at rock bottom, that something began to change. One night, after hours of lying in the dark, unable to sleep, unable to cry, unable to feel anything but that deafening emptiness, something inside me whispered. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't words. It was more like an impulse, a tiny spark of something I didn't even know existed inside me anymore. And that spark said, "Ask for help." I didn't know who to ask. I had distanced myself from God for years. I didn't go to church. I didn't pray. I no longer believed in anything but the emptiness I felt. But that night, in utter despair, I whispered to the darkness, "If there is something beyond this, if there is anyone, please, hear me." My voice was broken. My heart was in pieces. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I was genuinely asking for something. Not pretending. Not lying. Just asking. I can't carry this alone anymore. I don't know what this is, but I can't do it anymore. Please, if you exist, help me. And then, something extraordinary happened. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The silence remained. The darkness remained. The pain remained. But something tiny, almost imperceptible, had shifted within me. I had opened a door that had long been locked. I had reached out, even without knowing to whom, even without expecting anyone to take it. And that was the first ray of light in my dark valley. Though I didn't know it yet, that desperate whisper in the darkness had been heard. 3 weeks after that first plea, on a Friday night, something happened that would change everything. I had come home from work exhausted, as usual. I had eaten something without tasting it, as usual. I had turned on the television and let it talk to itself while I lost myself in my empty thoughts, as usual. But that night, something different happened. I turned off the TV. I don't know why. I just felt an urge and turned it off. The silence that followed was different from other silences. It was more present, as if the silence had weight, texture, presence. I sat on the living room floor, leaning my back against the sofa, and closed my eyes. I wasn't praying. I wasn't meditating. I was just there, present in that dense, living silence. And that's when I felt it. It wasn't a vision. It wasn't an audible voice. It wasn't anything I could rationally explain or accurately describe to someone who hadn't experienced it. It was a presence, pure, simple, undeniable presence. Something was there with me in that room, something immense, loving, infinitely patient, something that knew every bit of my pain, every wound in my heart, every dark thought I'd ever had, every tear I couldn't shed. And that something didn't judge me. It didn't condemn me. It didn't reject me. Just was there, with me, completely with me. My heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in so long, I didn't even recognize it anymore. Hope. You're here, I whispered into the silence. You're really here. And then, as if in response to my recognition, the presence intensified. It was as if someone had turned on a celestial faucet, and a river of light began to pour down upon me. It wasn't physical light. My eyes were closed, and the room was dark, but it was real light. More real than any light I'd ever seen. It was living, pulsating, warm, loving light. The light began to descend upon my head like golden water, liquid and soft. I felt it touch the top of my head, a comforting warmth, like the hand of someone who loves you gently resting there. The light fell across my forehead, and when it touched the space between my eyebrows, I felt my mind begin to clear. The obsessive thoughts, the endless worries, the constant mental noise, everything began to quiet, as if the light were washing my mind, removing layers and layers of dirt I didn't even know I was carrying. She continued down. When she reached my eyes, still closed, I felt tears begin to well up. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of arriving home after being lost for a long, long time. The light fell down my throat, and I felt something untie there. How many words unsaid? How many truths swallowed? How many times had I said, "I'm okay," when I was broken inside? The light gently, lovingly, undid that knot, and then she reached for my chest. When the light touched my heart, I sobbed. It was as if all the years of pain, of loneliness, of emptiness, of disconnection, of quiet despair, all of it began to dissolve into that warm, golden light that now pulsed in the center of my chest. My heart, which had been so cold, so hardened, so closed, began to soften. It began to expand. It began to pulse not just with blood, but with something more, with life. with light, with love. It was as if the ice that had surrounded my heart for so long was finally melting. And beneath that layer of ice, my true heart, my living heart, was there, waiting to beat again. The light filled my heart completely, and from my heart, it began to spread to my lungs, and each breath became a blessing. To my stomach, that ancient knot that lived there was unraveling. To my arms, my hands, my legs, my feet, I was being filled, completely filled. Divine light was driving out the emptiness, replacing the darkness, healing what was broken. And then, for the first time in years, I felt something I didn't even remember I was capable of feeling. Peace. It wasn't a circumstantial peace. It wasn't a peace because the problems had disappeared, or because life had become easier. Nothing in my external life had changed at that moment, but inside me, everything had changed. I was at peace, deeply, completely, unalterably at peace. I don't know how long I sat there, on the floor of my living room, immersed in that light, that presence, that peace. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. Time had stopped existing. But when I finally opened my eyes, the room was exactly as it had been. The couch was in the same place. The TV was off. The streetlights were streaming in through the window. Everything was the same, but I wasn't the same. I had changed, fundamentally, profoundly, irrevocably changed. I knew, with a certainty that needed no proof or argument, that I was no longer alone, that I had never been alone, that even in the darkest moments, in the deepest valleys, that presence, that light, was there. It always had been, waiting patiently for me to open the door, waiting for me to ask, waiting for me to allow myself to be found. And now that I had been found, everything was different. I got up from the floor and walked to the window. I looked up at the night sky, at the stars twinkling above, and for the first time in so long, I smiled. A real smile, not forced, not fake, just real. Thank you, I whispered to the universe, to God, to the light, to that presence that had saved me when I was drowning. Or, thank you for not giving up on me. And I felt, as clearly as I felt peace in my chest, an answer, not in words but in certainty. I will never give up on you. Never. That night, I slept, really slept. Not the restless sleep, filled with nightmares and constant awakenings I had known for so long, but a deep, restorative, healing sleep. And when I woke up the next morning, the world looked different. The colors were more vivid. The birdsong I'd barely noticed before sounded like music. The sunlight streaming through the window wasn't just light. It was hope. It was new life. It was promise. I went to the kitchen and made some coffee. And for the first time in months, I smelled it. Really smelled it. That fragrance I loved but had become just another neutral element of my automatic routine. I smelled it again. And when I took the first sip, I tasted it. I really tasted it. Tears streamed down my face again. But these were different from the tears of the night before. These were tears of gratitude, of rebirth, of rediscovery. I was alive, truly alive. For the first time in so long, I was present in my own life. In the days that followed, I began to notice things, little things, subtle things, but significant. A song would play on the radio exactly when I needed to hear that message. A friend I hadn't seen in years would call me out of the blue, just when I needed that connection. A book would fall off the shelf at the bookstore, and when I opened it, the first sentence I read was exactly what my soul needed to hear. Synchronicities, signs, whispers from the divine saying, I am here, I am with you, you are on the right path. And the more I paid attention, the more signs appeared. It was as if the entire universe were conspiring to remind me, at every moment, that I was not alone, that I was being guided, that the light that had found me on that fateful night hadn't gone away. It was still there, inside me, all around me, guiding my steps. My intuition, which had been silenced for so long by mental noise and spiritual disconnection, began to awaken. I knew things, not rationally, not logically, but I knew. I knew when to call someone. I knew when to avoid a situation. I knew when to say yes and when to say no. I knew which path to take, even when it didn't make logical sense. And when I followed that intuition, those gentle whispers of the divine light within me, things fell into place. Doors opened. Opportunities presented themselves. The right people crossed my path. It was as if I had been disconnected from the universal web of life for so long, and now, finally, I was plugged back in. And all the wisdom, all the guidance, all the love that had ever been available now flowed freely to me, naturally, without forcing, without following rigid rules or imposed structures. I began to develop spiritual practices. Every morning, I would wake up and before doing anything else, I would spend a few minutes in silence. I would close my eyes and connect with that light inside my chest. I could feel it pulsing there, alive, constant, and I would let it expand, fill my entire body, radiate into my day. Throughout the day, whenever I felt anxious or lost, I would stop. I would take a deep breath. I would place my hand on my heart and remind myself, the light is here. I am not alone. And instantly, peace returned. At night, before I went to sleep, I would give thanks. I would give thanks for the blessings, both obvious and hidden. I would give thanks for the challenges that made me grow. I would give thanks for the pain that led me to the light. I would give thanks for being alive, for having been found, for having the chance to truly live. And always, always, I ended by saying, may the divine light continue to illuminate my path. Weeks passed, then months, and I kept changing. Not overnight, not magically, but consistently, deeply. The things that used to shake me lost their power over me. Someone's critical comment, which would once have ruined my day, I could now see for what it was. A projection of that person's own pain, not a truth about me. Situations that once made me despair, I could now navigate with a calm I didn't know I was capable of, because I knew, deep down, that I was being guided. That even when I didn't understand why something was happening, there was a reason. There was a greater plan. I became more patient, more compassionate, kinder, not just with others, but with myself. For the first time in my life, I looked in the mirror and saw not a collection of flaws and shortcomings, but a human being on a journey. Imperfect, yes. Still learning, yes. But valuable, worthy, loved by the divine light that now lived permanently within me. And the more I lived connected to this light, the more it guided me to where I needed to go. I changed jobs, not because my last one was bad, but because I felt, clearly and undeniably, that there was another path for me. And when I followed that intuition, I found a job that fed not only my wallet, but also my soul. I ended relationships that drained me, not with anger or resentment, but with love and compassion, recognizing that not everyone is meant to be together forever. And I created space for new connections, more authentic, more aligned with who I was becoming. I forgave. God, how I forgave. I forgave people who hurt me. I forgave situations that left their mark on me. And most importantly, I forgave myself for all the years I lived disconnected, lost, in the dark, because I finally understood that everything was part of the journey, that I needed to be in the dark valley to recognize and appreciate the light when it arrived, that every wound was actually a door to healing, that every fall was an invitation to rise stronger. There was a moment, a few months after that fateful night, when I realized something extraordinary. I had found myself again. Not the version of me that existed before the darkness, not the person I was when things seemed simpler, but a deeper, truer, more whole version of myself. It was as if all the experiences of my life, the good and the bad, the joyful and the painful, had been pieces of a puzzle that finally fit together, revealing a picture that was beautiful, not despite the broken parts, but including them. I was no longer that empty man walking on autopilot, but I was also no longer the naive man I'd been before entering the dark valley. I was something new, something forged in the fire of pain and tempered in the water of healing. I was someone who knew darkness intimately, and because of that, I knew how to recognize and value light. One of the most noticeable changes was the emotional stability I developed. Before, I was a roller coaster, one day on cloud 9, the next at rock bottom, hostage to external circumstances, the words of others, the ups and downs of everyday life. But now, there was something different, an internal anchor. a center of gravity that remained constant even when everything around was turbulence. It doesn't mean I no longer felt emotions, quite the contrary. I felt them more deeply than ever. But there was a fundamental difference. I was no longer dominated by emotions. I felt them, acknowledged them, honored them, and then let them pass, like waves in the ocean that come and go. But the ocean remains. I had found that unchanging tranquility the scriptures speak of. It wasn't the absence of storms, it was the peace that remains firm in the center of the storm. There is, and this peace was unlike anything I had known before. It wasn't the peace of a vacation, which disappears the moment you return to reality. It wasn't the peace of a good day, which vanishes when something bad happens. It wasn't the conditional peace, dependent on everything being perfectly aligned in my life. It was a profound peace, rooted not in external circumstances but in an inner connection with divine light. It was the peace Christ promised when he said, "My peace I leave with you, not as the world gives do I give to you." This peace was with me when I woke up. It was with me in traffic. It was with me in stressful meetings at work. It was with me when I received bad news. It was with me when things didn't go as planned, because this peace did not depend on anything external. It came from within, from the place where divine light permanently resided. And as the internal changed, the external also began to change, not in the way I would have expected or planned. Life didn't become perfect. The challenges didn't disappear. But the way I navigated them was completely different. I made wiser decisions, not because I was smarter, but because I was more connected to that divine intuition that guided me. I knew when to say yes and when to say no. I knew when to act and when to wait. I knew when to speak and when to remain silent. New opportunities appeared, not because I frantically sought them, but because I was in the right flow of life. Doors opened naturally. The right people crossed my path. Synchronicities occurred with increasing frequency, and the things I needed to leave behind fell away naturally. Relationships that no longer served me dissolved gently. Situations that held me back resolved themselves. Paths that weren't mine closed, freeing me to pursue paths that were. Some things I had been carrying around for years started to heal. That back pain, the doctors said, was emotional tension manifesting in the body. It went away. It simply went away when I released the emotional tension that caused it. That chronic insomnia that had plagued me since adolescence. It disappeared when my mind learned to quiet down, when my heart found peace. That pattern of toxic relationships I kept repeating. Broken. Because I had healed the wounds that made me accept less than I deserved. I wasn't seeking cures. I was seeking the light. And the light, in its infinite wisdom, healed what needed healing, transformed what needed transforming, renewed what needed renewal. I began to realize something fascinating. Divine light wasn't just healing my past and transforming my present. It was also actively shaping my future. Things I planted now, connected and guided by the light, blossomed in ways I could never have planned. Connections I made led to unexpected opportunities months later. Choices I made, which seemed small at the time, proved pivotal in the unfolding of my story. It was as if I'd been trying to build my life with my own hands, in the dark, without proper tools. And now, I had a divine architect by my side, lighting the way, showing me where to place each brick. My future, which had previously seemed like a threatening fog full of uncertainty, now seemed open, full of possibilities, promising. Not because I knew exactly what was going to happen, but because I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that whatever happened, I would be guided through it, that the light that had found me at my lowest point would never abandon me. Divine light had become my compass for life. Before making any important decision, I would stop. I would close my eyes. I would feel the light pulsing in my chest, and I would silently ask, "Is this aligned with my true path?" And always, I received an answer. Not in words, but in sensation. An expansion in my chest meant yes, go ahead. A contraction, a discomfort, meant no, this is not the way for you. And when I followed that inner compass, everything flowed. It doesn't mean it was easy, but it means it was right. That I was where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to be doing, becoming who I was supposed to become. The light guided me not only in big decisions, but in small daily choices. Who to spend time with, what to eat, when to rest, when to act, when to wait. My life had become a dance with the divine. I moved, the light guided me. I stumbled, the light lifted me. I doubted, the light reminded me. And in that dance, I was alive in a way I had never been before. And then, one seemingly ordinary day, as I walked in a park near my home, watching the trees sway in the wind and the children playing in the grass, a profound realization hit me so hard that I had to sit down on a bench. I had spent my whole life trying to win, overcoming challenges, overcoming obstacles, overcoming my limitations, overcoming others, overcoming the world. I thought I needed to be strong, invincible, perfect, that I needed to have all the answers, control all outcomes, never show weakness, and that's exactly what broke me. This impossible attempt to be something no human being can be. But now I understood. I didn't need to conquer the world. I needed to allow myself to be illuminated by it. I didn't need to have all the answers. I needed to ask the right questions. I didn't need to be perfect. I needed to be truthful. I didn't need to control everything. I needed to trust the divine flow of life. Tears streamed down my face there, on that park bench, as children laughed around me and the sun shone in the sky. I thought I needed to conquer the world, but I needed to allow myself to be enlightened, and in enlightenment, I found something far greater than any external victory could give me. I found peace, purpose, presence, wholeness. I found myself, and I found God. Every morning was now a new dawn in every sense of the word. I woke no longer with that heaviness in my chest, but with a gentle anticipation of the day that would unfold. Not because I knew what would happen, but because I knew that whatever happened, I would face it connected to the light. I'd open the curtains and watch the sun rise as if for the first time, because, in a way, it was the first sunrise of the new me, the me that had died in the dark valley and been reborn in the light. And each day was an opportunity, a chance to live more authentically, to love more deeply, to serve more generously, to grow more fully. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, truly, fully, intensely living. I had developed the habit of walking every morning, right after waking up, not for exercise, although that was beneficial, but as a way to commune with the light, with life, with the divine. I walked slowly, paying attention to everything. The birdsong, the smell of dew-soaked grass, the feel of fresh air in my lungs, the sunlight warming my skin. And as I walked, I talked. Not out loud, but internally. I talked to God, to the divine light, to the universe. I gave thanks, asked for guidance, shared my dreams and fears, celebrated the small victories of the previous day. And always, I felt the presence walking with me. Invisible, but real. Silent, but communicative. Subtle, but powerful. On these morning walks, under the sun that symbolized the light that now lived within me, I felt more connected, more alive, more myself than at any other time. It was there, walking in the sunshine, that I received my best ideas, my clearest guidance, my deepest insights, because that's where I was most open, most receptive, most present. And I learned something that changed everything. Inner silence is sacred. For years, my mind was a noisy, chaotic, incessant place. Thoughts racing, worries spinning in circles, constant judgments of myself and others. But now, after months of practicing connecting with the light, quieting the mind, being present, an inner silence had settled in. It wasn't an empty silence, like the emptiness I'd felt before. It was a full silence, full of presence, full of peace, full of potential. It was in this silence that I heard the whispers of divine light. It was in this silence that my intuition spoke most clearly. It was in this silence that I found answers to questions my logical mind could not resolve. My inner silence had become my temple. I didn't need to go anywhere physically to connect with the sacred. The sacred lived within me, accessible anytime, anywhere, through that inner silence. And the longer I dwelt in this silence, the more it expanded. Moments of silence became hours. Hours became days, until inner silence became my natural state, and mental noise the exception. not the rule. And in this temple of inner silence, I worshipped, not with words or elaborate rituals, but with presence, with gratitude, with surrender to the divine flow of life. And now, after sharing this journey with you, I want to say something with all the certainty of my being. The divine light is always there, always, no matter how dark it seems, no matter how lost you feel, no matter how broken, how exhausted, how hopeless you are. The light never goes out, never. She just waits, patiently, lovingly, endlessly, she waits. It waits for you to open the door. It waits for you to ask for help. It waits for you to stop trying to do everything alone and recognize that you don't need it, that you never needed it, because the divine light has always been there, within you, around you, sustaining you even when you didn't know it. And if there's one thing I've learned on this journey from the dark valley to the light, it's this: look intently for that comforting light, not with desperation, not with anxiety, but with intention, with openness, with a willingness to be found. Stop, breathe, close your eyes, place your hand on your heart, and whisper, with all the honesty you can muster, I am ready. I am ready for the light. And then wait, not with rigid expectations of how it will manifest, but with the certainty that it will. The light shines now, in this very moment, within you. You may not feel it yet, you may not see it yet, but it's there, pulsing gently in the center of your chest, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be allowed, waiting to gush forth and fill your entire being. Today, years after that decisive night that changed everything, I live in the light. It doesn't mean everything is perfect. It doesn't mean I don't face challenges. It doesn't mean I don't have difficult days or moments of doubt. But it means I never walk alone again. Divine light is my constant companion, my unfailing guide, my source of unchanging peace, my refuge in storms, my celebration in joys. She wakes me every morning. She walks with me throughout the day. She quiets my mind at night. She sustains me with every breath. And I know, as surely as I know my own name, that this light will never abandon me, because it's not something external that can go away. It's part of me. It is, in fact, my true self, the essence of who I truly am beneath all the fears, all the wounds, all the illusion. And so I testify to you today. If you're in the dark valley, there's a way out. If you're lost, you can be found. If you're broken, you can be healed. If you're empty, you can be filled. It doesn't matter what you did or didn't do. It doesn't matter how far you've strayed. It doesn't matter how many times you tried and failed. Divine light awaits you, with open arms, with unconditional love, with infinite patience. All you have to do is ask, open, allow, and then, my friend, prepare yourself. Because when the divine light pours into you, when it spreads throughout your body and soul, when it enriches your days and opens your future, when it imbues you with that unalterable tranquility, you will never be the same again. Never again. And that, I promise you, is the best news you can ever receive. Today, I live in the light. And you, have you already found yours? The question is not accusatory. It's not judgmental. It's simply a gentle invitation. An invitation to stop carrying the weight alone, to allow something greater to sustain you, to discover that the feeling you've always sought in the external world has actually always been available in the internal world. Divine light shines in your heart at this very moment. You just need to stop, breathe, feel. She's there, always has been, always will be. The light that illuminates will never be extinguished. And when you finally allow yourself to be enlightened, when you dive into that loving presence that has always known you, always loved you, always waited for you, you will understand what I discovered that night that changed everything. You've never been alone, and you never will be. Light is eternal. Love is eternal. And you, my friend, you are made of that same light, that same love. Welcome home.